Thank you all for checking out this week's episode. Once again, I'm John. If you like what you heard and saw today, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and check out our brand new merch store with hats, coffee mugs, t-shirts, other cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Again, thank you all for support. Be safe, and see you next week. How's it going? John here, the host of Spirit Talk, and tonight get to have a fun one today. Once again, to get to welcome Thomas Winterton back onto the program. Thomas is the superintendent of the infamous Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. And then once again, for the second time as well, Eric Bass, the bass player of the band Shinedown, also the producer, does about 30 other things in the band, plays about 12 other instruments while they perform live. One of my good friends on the road, and why touring is so fun. And people like Eric, the rest of the guys in Shinedown, obviously, are the reason why I enjoy what I do. But one of the things, Thomas, I guess we'll kind of lead from here, is when we're on days off and touring, a lot of the stuff we center on is UFOs, whether it's ancient aliens and obviously Skinwalker Ranch, myself and Barry, the drummer. It's kind of surreal. So I know it's been almost a year since you've been on here, but like, how's your life been? How's life on the ranch? How's family and all that?
Everything's good. Family's good and life is good. Very blessed, and life at the ranch has been crazy. So we just finished filming season 5 here. We finished up the end of September, and I think all of us as a group are still dealing with a little PTSD from some of the things that happened, but we're good.
In terms of, man, there's a lot to jump into off the bat. When it comes to what's the biggest changes you've noticed from filming season to season as you dig deeper scientifically into kind of what you guys are trying to find out there?
It's a good question. When we get done, filming is such a condensed schedule. I mean, we film for 14, 15 weeks, but it is literally, every day is just jam-packed, and there's not a lot of time to really go over and review what's taken place. And we obviously go through the, what we'll call it the high level stuff that's easy to find. And you'll see that on the reviews there on the show when we go and do our reviews. But after the lights go down and everybody leaves the ranch and it's quiet again, there are terabytes and terabytes of data that have to be reviewed. And of course, us as a group are reviewing. And to your question, the biggest thing is just trying to get a grasp on what it is that we saw, what we didn't see, and then trying to use that to guide us into the next season. Really trying to shape our experiments and the direction that we go based off of what we found. And some things, in the moment, they look fantastic and amazing, but then when you start doing a little deeper dive, you find out, for example, we might see something in the sky that looks incredible. And then when we start doing a deeper dive, we'll find out later, oh, that was flight 1628,
Mm-hmm.
and the sun was glinting off the side. And so really diving in, doing our due diligence, and then taking that and trying to use that to determine what we're going to go. And so the change, I think, is only dictated, that the biggest change is based on what we saw, possibly altering our focus of investigation, right? The way we're going to attack it going into the next year. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much of your experiences, or how much of when you go into these investigations, how much of it do you think is colored by like a confirmation bias at this point? Because you've seen so much, to your point about that's just flight 1170 or whatever it is. Do you find it hard to be, you and the rest of the group, do you find it hard to be completely objective, I guess is a good way of asking?
I'll actually say that goes both ways, right? The confirmation bias. So you get enough glints off those airliners, you actually get to the point that when you see something incredible, you're like, yeah, it's probably just a plane. So confirmation bias can actually go the other way too, in dismissing things. And I'll tell you right now, I can't I can't share what it is because it happened during season 5. But a prime example of that is sometimes when we come across things, maybe we don't take them as serious in the moment as we should, because we're already, our confirmation bias is already trying to explain it away with the mundane, prosaic, causation, when in fact, when we start digging in a little bit deeper and finding out what we thought it wasn't that at all, and it actually is something pretty incredible, then you're almost kicking yourself, because if you'd gone into it thinking it was incredible, we probably would have taken a little more care in how we approached it, how we documented it. So it can also lead to, I don't want to say being sloppy because that's not the right word, but it goes both ways. And I think that at this point, if anything, we've learned that we have to we cannot, Eric, our lead investigator, Eric, is always saying, I'm not here to believe, I'm not here to disbelieve, I'm here to observe. And once you get egg on your face a few times, it really starts making you be cautious about jumping to conclusions, whether it's to dismiss it or whether it's to jump to the exotic and say, oh, look, there's a UFO. So I think that we've all been humbled at a couple different points during this investigation. If anything, I think we're starting to get more cautious, and we're to the point now where, like, we don't know, like, let's just see where the data leads and let it before we make statements that makes us look like fools later.
It seems weird though that people will kind of, I mean, I get where you're coming from, but to be happy and excited about possibly seeing something or having a scientific an event happen where you're kind of like, oh man, this could be something. I mean, I think the problem with me with a lot of scientists that are mainstream or supposedly God's gift to the earth. I mean, I'll say anyone that follows the podcast knows I don't like Bill, not a science guy, for the fact he's really not a scientist or anything. But his approach and how he tells people they're wrong or refutes people without, if I see a glimmer in someone's eye, whether they create music or one of their studies or one of their scientific approaches find something that wasn't there before, they didn't know was there, I never want to hamper that. When I see some of these prolific scientists that the media labels as the go-to voice, they kind of take away from the people that are on the ground really caring. And who cares if they might assume something wrong or not assume something the right way, but the fact that they're looked down upon for being excited about what they do and what they're studying. It's almost like a fine line. I get where you're coming from, but I also like put that out there, be excited. Because I think if anything's taught me in the last couple of years, to be excited about science and look at every avenue possible before I even make an honest judgment on anything.
Yep. Well, look, we're all human, right? And in the moment, and that's what we're capturing a lot. I mean, that's what you're seeing on television. You're seeing us real moment. And I have to say, probably any other genre, it plays better to it than it does with science. Because you got to realize, like, you're serious, and by serious, I just mean like a lot of these academics. And look, I have a problem with a lot of these guys. They let their learning get in the way of, they're so cut on what's possible, what's not possible, that they're blinded, and so, but the hard thing is, and this goes to the heart of the nature, is, when if this investigation ever wraps up, and our scientists working on the ranch are real scientists,
right?
And they have to feed their families, and it'll become necessary, if and when that day comes, it becomes necessary for them to go out and find other work. And if their credibility is shot to hell, because it's been put out there in the moment, you have to understand, most of the science papers, those are coming after heavy peer review. They've had years. Matter of fact, a lot of the discoveries that they make with, like, the Webb telescope and the Hubble and that, those aren't released for like 2 years after they make the discovery, because they're extremely methodical. They pride themselves in being very disciplined and going through the process. Whereas we've got the cameras on us in the moment that we're making these discoveries. Yeah. And of course we're human, sometimes we're yelling and screaming and high-fiving and really excited about it. There's been a couple times when um in the moment it looked like we had captured something absolutely incredible. And we're like all hooping and hollering. Of course, the cameras are rolling, right? And then we go back and we find out that it was it was some equipment that was it wasn't malfunctioning, but we hadn't anticipated it it had some interference with some of the other equipment. And so we actually went to the network, our production guys were like, you can't play that. Like that, even though we were excited at the moment, it was totally legit, and so there was nothing anomalous about it. And there's been a couple times where we've held them back from showing that simply because our guys got to go get a job at the end of the day. And in the
Right.
science community, they take that very seriously. So it's trying to balance it,
It's interesting. There's a correlation there between the science you all are doing and what I consider and a lot of people consider to be really good art. And I know that sounds odd, but if you look at a comedian or you look at a band who is trying out a song for the first time live in front of an audience, rather than you know honing it somewhere in private and then releasing it. Some of these scientists you're talking about, they hone everything and they make sure it's all perfect and nice and neat before they, God forbid they look stupid.
right?
But there's just something just tangible in an amazing way when you watch a comedian go out and try material for the first time in front of an audience. They're trying out these jokes for the first time. They've conceptualized them in their head. Now they're going to go try them. Or a band that is just the night before in the practice room wrote this song real fast, and the lyrics aren't exactly nailed down yet, but we're going to go out and play it tonight. And there's some energy in that, and I love that about what you all are doing. It's very punk rock.
Well, to your point, Eric, you are, for someone who doesn't know the band Shinedown, like your involvement outside of playing with the producing and stuff, like kind of talk me through how difficult it is for you to, once you have that song you've been sitting on for 6 months, you might go back to a week later, a couple months later, when the thing's really about to come release into the world, you guys have always said that once it's out in the world, it's everyone else's.
Yeah.
But to get to that point, do you wish you could have more time sometimes to fine tune it, or does that get kind of in the way of the art actually being released? Because maybe there's not much more you can do with something.
I have probably fine-tuned it past where I should, stopped, gone back, unfine-tuned it, and put it back in place the way it should have been originally before it ever gets to that point. I don't know if I don't know who to attribute this to. I've heard that it's maybe the Shaolin monks. I've also heard that perhaps it's some and you might know this Indian tribe in the Southwest, but they make these art pieces in the sand, and then when it's done, if they do it absolutely perfectly, they take it and they put a line through it and mess it up, because nothing can be perfect, and the imperfection is what makes it perfect. That, in rock and roll anyway, and in punk rock, and also, man, I think that in science, you look at it, like, again, I know maybe I'm not answering John's question completely, but well, let me go back. No, I never wish I had more time with it. I've had enough time with it by that point. I've probably overthought it at that point. And that's why, so when we play live, to what my point I was making earlier, we're playing these songs that we've crafted. We're playing them for an audience, but we have these moments during the show, 5 or 6 of them, where Brent is talking to the crowd and he's getting them hyped up, and that's unscripted, and we're playing a song that maybe we just, or a musical thing that maybe we just came up with in the practice room before we went on stage, and I might fall on my face in front of 20,000 people, in any moment, and I love mixing those two things, but the perfection is what is it? Perfection is the enemy of the good, isn't that what they say, right?
Yep.
Not perfection is the enemy of good. Is that right? Yeah. It's
we know what you're trying to say.
yeah, I'm sorry. I get flustered sometimes trying to get everything out. But and another thing, man, I heard a great compliment paid to Eric Bard by a gentleman named Eric Weinstein. I don't know if I know that, John, you're familiar with him,
Yep.
and yeah. he commented on how thorough Eric was and how interested he was in what was going on at Skinwalker. I think Eric's probably one of the most important scientific minds we have, voices we have right now, for the people doing real science. And I know he can be a controversial figure, and his brother is as well, his brother Brett. But I tell you what, that really, for me, just hearing him give what you all are doing, his endorsement, and I forget what podcast he was on when he did that, but that's huge. For me, that was like, wow, this is a guy who a lot of people look to and have a lot of respect for, going, hey, these guys are doing real science, and there's something really weird going on.
Yeah, it's a very, like, it must be like, I wonder how many people are chomping at the bit to wish someone like Eric to fall, or scientists to, oh, he's got so much egg on his face, we got rid of him, I want to be the next guy. It's like, it must get in the way and hinder actual science when you have people that aren't looking at the science, but they're looking at replacing the person that represents that science field, if that makes sense.
Well, one thing I've noticed in academia is and maybe I'm wrong, this is just my perception, but it sure seems like when you get into the science field, and again, this science area is a whole different animal than, like the music, because I totally relate what you say, Eric. The authenticity is what people crave. That's what they're hungry for. But you get into academia, and they use it as arrows, to sling at you.
Right.
And it's almost like they're trying to show that they're smarter than the next person. And the only way they can do that is to try to find faults. And the whole peer review process, that, if you want my opinion, I think the peer review process, obviously there's a place for it, and I understand why it's a good thing. But I also think that it's been as detrimental to science as it has been helpful, because you get so focused on that peer review and trying to pick it apart and piece it, that it actually, I think it hinders people from being as creative and as bold. As I know with Eric, I've had conversations with Eric. That whole fear of putting something out there, then just being ripped to shreds through the peer review, is real. And I'm like, who cares? Like, look at some of these scientists that went out and made outlandish claims, and everybody rushed to prove them wrong. And it was in that process that they actually ended up finding the real answer, right? And if they hadn't made that outlandish claim, nobody would have been paying attention. No one would have been focused on that. But again, you get into that science field, and a lot of them don't see that way. And you got these academics that, oh, I could do it twice as good as that guy. I'll tell you right now, we get hundreds, if not thousands, of messages like every month from people telling us how we're a bunch of idiots and they could do it so much better. And that goes for the science, it goes for my job, it goes for the security, it just goes down the list. So it is people that are, I think, trying to some way make themselves relevant to the conversation, and they do that by trying to trash what's going on.
Welcome to rock and roll, Thomas. That's what it is, man. Yeah, that's what it is, dude. I could, there are, everybody could have done it better, faster. I should be, but you're not.
Right. I can play that twice as good as you guys can. Yeah. I actually got to where I kind of enjoy it, and I'll never forget, after the episode 1 aired, its very first season, and we were all so excited and proud of what we'd put together. We were excited for what happened. And, we were totally 100% sincere in what we were doing. And so my mind, like, it was solved. There's no way anybody could criticize. And I remember getting online after it airs, and I didn't even sleep that night because the reviews were so brutal, and they're attacking us personally and doing this. And the next morning we had a call with the network, with the production company, and our executive producer was congratulating us and telling us that the numbers were good. And I was like, I was sure they were going to cancel us, because based on what I was reading online, it wasn't good. And he said, look, if people are talking bad about you, we're thrilled with that. If they're talking good about you, we're thrilled with that too. If they're not saying anything, that's when we have a problem. And it's just gotten to the point. I take it all in stride, and I actually got to where I kind of enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of biases, I mean, that negativity bias is such a horrible thing to try to deal with because, you know, it seems to be something that's ingrained in our old DNA, our old brain somewhere about, you know, I've heard people talk about how, you know, we're worried about getting kicked out of the tribe. And so that one thing that would be bad, that would be the thing that would cause you to starve to death, you know? So it's this thing that's just ingrained in us so hard that I can read a page full of wonderful comments about the music I've made, and that one person that says something, you know, negative, man, that's going to stick with me. And so it's caused me to just kind of not read them anymore, not read anything anymore, you know?
It's a question I had, hopefully, or maybe you talk about this in season 5 and stuff coming up, but I know recently we were texting all of us about the stuff in Miami with like the sightings and stuff. And whether you believe that or not, other sightings and the declassification that's currently happening right now with everything going on, when that stuff kind of hits, no matter where it is in the world, do you guys sense a change in Skinwalker Ranch at all? Like there's a connection somehow? Or do you guys just kind of treat each day as what we do here is going to happen here? Or do you kind of look for those correlations of sightings or stuff like that might be happening?
Good question. Look, we really try to stay focused on what we're doing in a lot of ways, not try to get distracted by a lot of what's going on. That being said, you know, Travis is still with his day job, and also by extension, Jay Stratton, you know, they still hold the top secret security clearance.
Yep.
They're still privy to some of the behind the scenes. And so that's been very helpful to our team in the fact that, in a way, the stuff that we need to know is brought to our attention, and we don't really pay attention to very much else because, you know, there are times where we'll be like, hey, have you guys seen anything that's similar to this? Or this is happening here. Maybe be watching out for that. And so we get a filtered version of it. Let's just put it that way.
Interesting. Yeah, because I was always wondering if stuff like that when it happens, like in my head, I always picture like UFOs or extraterrestrial, whatever we would call them, like this hive mentality where it's all connected and one sighting here is going to be the sighting here or something like that, or if it's a symbol, or it just, it's just so fascinating to me that it's so quick to, again, do I really believe that there are 10-foot tall gray aliens running around the Miami Mall? No. Do I wish it was happening? Yes. So I'm kind of in that thing where it's like, what if this? I don't know. It's such a rabbit hole to go down to, but it's like I was always curious. That's why I love Skinwalker Ranch. It's such a cool approach towards the science of the unknown, which it really resonates with me because it's so easy to say, there's no 9-foot aliens in Miami running around. There's no those. It was just kids with sticks throwing fireworks at each other. So it's like when that stuff like that happens, I'm like, ugh. But then you watch like a Skinwalker Ranch, and you're kind of like, oh, now there's something to this. Maybe the explanation actually is this, or it isn't this. Like, I don't know, it's super fascinating to me.
Yeah, well, it's hard to with today's media and social media, especially now we have AI cropping up.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I look down the road, I'm like, how is your average person ever going to be able to discern between truth and fiction? Because it's becoming almost impossible to know when we're being told the truth, when we're not. And so it is a challenge.
Yeah, but that's something you guys are doing, which is you are fostering an environment of trust, I think, in the viewer, with the viewer, where you know, I believe what you guys are doing, and I have from the beginning. It's not put on. You can tell that it's honest. Obviously, what you've gone through physically dealing with whatever this is, you know, that's you're not gonna go out on that kind of a limb just for television, you know. So I think that's really important because I feel like people can look to the science that you all are doing and feel good about it and feel like it's honest science. And plus, the things that you guys have captured on film is amazing. It really is. And it's nice to know when I see those images and I see what's happening that it's actually what happened, and it's actually being looked at through a lens of healthy skepticism and science, trying to figure out what it is, trying to figure out what's going on, not jumping to conclusions. And I think that's why the audience is what it is for you all. It's like I don't have to worry. I don't have to guess. I don't have to try to decipher what's going on.
Well, I appreciate hearing you say that. I know the team appreciates that as well. And that's our hope, is that we can foster and keep that trust. And I'll tell you right now, I'm grateful for the team that I work with, because I know, Eric, Travis, Brandon, the whole team, Caleb, Bryant, it's not worth our integrity. And if the day comes that they want us to start fabricating or making stuff up, I'm done. I don't need that. We didn't go out looking for this show to begin with. They came knocking on our door and begging us. And it was never on our radar. I can't even count the number of times where I had network people or production people call me for the first, 2 years Brandon owned the ranch. Nobody knew who the owner was. They only knew that I was running it. And so I would get the phone calls, and I can't even count the number of times I got people calling and pitching us shows and saying, hey, would you guys be interested? And I would pass it on to Brandon, and he always just responded with the same 2 words: not interested. That wasn't, if that had been our focus, he would have jumped into it and said, hey, well, let's explore this. And it was quite the opposite. And the day comes that we can't be honest, or the network tries to make it into something that it's not, we're done. We'll walk away. And the beautiful thing about what we have today is we have options. It used to be you had network television and that was it, right? And now, with the advent of YouTube and streaming and all these other things, we have plenty of options. There's no need for us to fabricate. So our hope is just to continue to follow the data, be honest with people. You're going to see some times we're high-fiving and clapping, and we're going to find out later down the road that, it was a bird or something, but we'll be honest about it. And we have been, even in these I really value the opportunity to come on and speak with people like you guys. This is when we're able to talk about some of the things, and if there's clarifications, or be able to say, oh, actually on further review, we saw that. So anyways, I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously you've been on History Channel this whole time with this. I've always wondered, especially with subject matter like this, is History Channel, if their approach, obviously the government and people that are trying to either hide or declassify the stuff want to have a lot of control of it. I wonder if History Channel has ever been approached saying, hey, if you come across footage or these scientists or find something, you have to go through us first before this releases to public. Like, is there any type of security, like that type of stuff going on?
I doubt it, and I'll tell you why. Brandon is an executive producer, and he's got creative control over the show. And awesome. That right there by itself is something unique that we have that you don't, Correct. I'm not aware of any other reality TV series that has that. So for the network to do that, Brandon would know about it. And Brandon is very transparent with, especially our executive team with Eric, myself, and Bryant overseeing those things. Brandon's extremely transparent. He would have told us. And not only that, we know what we film. We know what we came across.
Yeah.
There's only been one time in the history of the network that I felt like they didn't accurately portray the events. And we came down on them. So we were so upset. And that was clear back in the first season, and it's never happened again. So I've personally never been what we filmed, we're watching, it makes it on television. And with the exception of chronological order, we film 15 weeks. You never know what's going to make it on or what's not. So chronologically, maybe it's not perfectly the way that happened, but the events, the results, everything, I haven't seen anything there that gives me concern as to we're being stifled or things are being twisted to serve the government's agenda or trying to quiet it out. The only time that we've had things that didn't go on the network was like, no, we're not doing that. Is, believe it or not, there were some things that we did that they're like, yeah, it's too Hollywood. No one would believe it. And so,
really,
yeah, and it wasn't because of some nefarious agenda. It was just really, it came down to we're being told when we film this, like, we have to simplify it in a way that a fifth grader could understand. So when the scientists start speaking all of their scientific gibberish and it's going over all of our heads, that's when either Caleb or Bryant or myself get cued by the executive producers, like, can you ask them what that means? So if you watch, like, sometimes we'll be like, what does that mean? And it's because
okay,
we got to get them saying it in a way that a fifth grader could understand. And so some of the things that haven't shown, it's simply because there's not an easy, quick way to explain it to the audience that they would understand at a fifth grade level.
Travis seems very good at that. Actually,
Yes.
He seems very good at breaking it down, for and putting it into a way that I can understand it.
He is very good at it. Yep.
Yeah, and I watched when Brandon was on Sean Ryan podcast. I watched that podcast, and that's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite episodes I've watched because it gave me this insight into him that I didn't know existed. Because on the show, he's kind of this Professor X type character, who flies
he's like
in
a James
on a helicopter.
Bond villain. Like, he's just out in the shadows.
Flies in on a helicopter, sits down, gives you all some direction, sometimes vague direction, sometimes direct direction, leaves. And I like the fact that he started to participate more, which has been great. But watching him on that show, man, and getting the insight into who he is as a person and what his background is and how all the hard work that's gone into everything that he has and all of this stuff, it was, I really enjoyed it. He seems like a really great person to work for.
Oh, he is. And he is Brandon's, he's the mix. He's the guy that could be the executive and bark out orders to get things done. But he's also the guy that you can hang with, and he's a ton of fun to hang with behind the scenes. Got a great sense of humor, and he's always saying he's a 17-year-old kid trapped in a 40-year-old body, and big into pop culture, big into music. He's a musician himself. He was in a band, and so he's a great guy. He's been great to work for.
I know all of us collectively in different talks and stuff and hanging out or whatever, we've had this spiritual connection, whether with the faith or whatever it is. But and I think it was Tucker Carlson had a guest on where they talked about that this declassification UFO stuff might be connected to a religious or spiritual type of connection. And I was wondering with you two, with how spiritual we are, whether we want to go in deep depth of that. I mean, people that follow this podcast know I talk about all the time, but is there what could the connection be between religion or a faith or a spiritual entity type thing connected to the consciousness or this UFO type stuff?
Man, yeah, I'm glad I'm glad you brought that up, because I was actually going to touch on that with Thomas and ask him about that at some point, because this has been coming to the forefront where people are starting to. Now, somebody like Dr. Stephen Greer has been sort of talking about this for a long time, where he's been talking about. It was something I really had to wrap my brain around for a second, because you're throughout our entire childhood and into adolescence and into adulthood, UFOs, aliens has been technological. Right. It's been, everything is technological. And then I think Dr. Greer was the first person that I ever spoke with or started having conversations with or listening to him speak about how, he in his experience that these beings communicate with consciousness, and it's spiritual, and they're these spiritual beings. And then now that's really started to kind of pop up in a lot of other places. And I find that interesting when it comes to Skinwalker, because initially when I first heard about Skinwalker Ranch before the show ever, it was about the Skinwalkers and about these entities or beings that would appear and materialize and dematerialize and I was trying, I could never really at the in that time wrap my head around what does that have to do with UFOs? What does this have to do with
Yep.
aliens or interdimensional beings or whatever? I find it very interesting that this has started to come to light because it starts to kind of make sense to me in a way. And this is going to sound odd, maybe not, but I don't find it shocking. Uh, if I found out if full disclosure happened and they were like, human beings are, we found out that human beings are vessels for souls, and that's what they are, and that's why aliens are interested, and I say aliens loosely. These beings are interested in us and in what we have going on and why we're being observed. And it's tied into evil, dark forces, demonic forces, and good forces battling each other spiritually. For some reason, I feel like I wouldn't be surprised at all, and it's almost like I kind of already know that. Does that make sense? Like I already have this
Yeah.
feeling like that's what it is. And because I've been thinking so heavily on it, that's where I've arrived. I've arrived in this place of, and I'm a Christian. Uh, uh, Perhaps in the last, and John knows this, in the last year and a half, more so than ever in my life. And it just does, it wouldn't surprise me at all. It wouldn't surprise me at all if now I'm not saying God is an alien, I mean,
Right.
obviously a creator is much bigger than what we're talking about. But just the spiritual nature of, literally maybe a battle for souls, maybe a battle for, between real good and evil, like actual biblical good and evil.
Yep.
And again, I I'll step out on that limb and just say that when I've been thinking about it and processing it, it it doesn't feel foreign to me. That doesn't feel like a foreign concept. It doesn't feel like something that is surprising. So that's kind of where I've been with it.
Yeah.
But I am really interested in how that applies to Skinwalker Ranch though, because it seems like there's a lot of that going on along with the technological, which
Right. Like how do you,
I
the
find
science, you have
super
to separate
interesting.
both of those. It's super impressive to me.
Yeah. Um, so I was raised LDS or most people know them as Mormons
Yep.
here in Utah. And one of the fundamental beliefs that the church believes is that, God created many worlds, just like this one, right? And then another teaching, obviously, well, not obviously, but another teaching that they have is that, we're spirits housed in a vessel of clay. The body is just simply a house for our spirit, and that when we die, the spirit continues on living, and of course the body goes back to the earth, but that we existed before we came here. So, which to me, in my mind, is we start talking about interdimensional stuff. you know, for me, it wasn't that much different than what I was raised thinking, anyways. The idea that God created all these other worlds would mean that there's people out there. And then, is it too far of a leap to think that maybe some of them were more advanced than us and have the capabilities of being able to come in and peek in on us? So for me, it wasn't, I guess it didn't seem like that far of a stretch. Just based on my religious upbringing. And then you're right about the whole the whole legend of Skinwalker derives from a curse that was placed on it by a Navajo shaman, and the whole spiritual thing. The interesting thing to me is I think that this would have to be a question. I could never speak for the team on this. I think it's so personal where each one of us are at in our journey out
Right.
there that you'd probably get 5 very different answers. But for me, um, you brought up the observer effect earlier, and I wonder too how much that can play into it if you get a large audience focused in on something, what power that has to manifest it, or you go back to some of the science experiments like the double slit experiment and being able to collapse the wavelength and get matter to behave differently based on the observer. And so, we've witnessed a lot of things out there. I can't tell you, I think that I feel confident I could speak for our team in saying that I don't think there's a single one of us out there that do not believe that there's not an intelligence behind it. Right? So there's some type of intelligence behind the phenomena, at least some of it, because some of it is so targeted and so specific, and that it's hard to walk away not believing that. I know Bigelow's team, when they left the ranch, and they had a word salad that I never get right, but sentient, precognitive, something. They believe there's an intelligence behind it too. And for me personally, I still hold on and value so many of the beliefs and values that I was raised with, but I have found that I have a much harder time with like organized religion at this point.
Yeah.
I still consider myself spiritual, but based on some of the things, I think I've gone more towards science type of, maybe thinking that the thunder in the sky isn't Thor running around throwing his hammer, but maybe there's some, maybe some principles at play there.
I've always loved, I went way science for a long time. Like I again, John knows it's been my more spiritual religious journey has me really seeking it out has started in the last year and a half. I mean, I grew up in a very Christian household, and I went to church and did all of the things and said all of the prayers that I was supposed to say, and and then of course when I got I got my 20s, got a chance to get out, I got out, and I paid so much attention to science, but there's just always been something that I can't explain that feels right about spirituality and about that there is something else going on. It feels like home. Not home as in like I grew up in it, like home as in there's something here, but you can't deny the sign. But you can't, what's that?
Familiar?
Familiar. Yes, that's a great word. Thank you. And I love where the science and that meet, because you can't, I don't believe you can have one without the other. There's people try to decouple these things from each other that shouldn't be decoupled. Like a lot of atheists, I think, and I'm not throwing daggers at anybody, but they tend to want to just completely decouple science from anything spiritual. And I enjoy listening to the scientists, the ones I can find who will speak about it, who are spiritual, who are steeped in their field,
Right.
because they sort of confirm for me, and that's what I want to hear, but they confirm for me that one can't exist without the other. And so yeah, I just I just think that there's so much we don't know. I mean, I know you know that already. You live it out there all the time.
I do.
Yeah.
I agree with you though. Like I will say, I've long held the belief that God is God simply because he's perfect scientist. And even as a kid, I remember, even though I grew up religious, And there was always the evolution being taught. You know, it was like you had to believe in creation or evolution, but you couldn't do both. And I always just wondered, like, well, what if God used evolution as the way that he created it? Maybe we did start out in a petri dish, like in his lab. Like for me, I never saw how it had to be one or the other. And I'm with you. I actually think that I think they both can validate the other.
I mean, I think that everyone's always looking for this missing link, right? This missing link between us and other primates. And I think that missing link, personally, I think that missing link is that we were touched at some point by something else, you know, by someone else, by God. And there was a spirit placed inside of us that is not found in an awareness, a spirit that is not found in any other animal on this planet. You know, I think that's the missing link. If you want to, that's my take on it. You know, so yeah, I mean,
and Thomas, I know you've before in other interviews, even on this podcast, you've talked at length about the poltergeist, the physical stuff you've done with these entities and stuff like that. And it's like a question I've always had for you, and I didn't really know how to ask it until I kind of started like during this talk. As these seasons go on and episodes, the science goes further and further. How much of this is a personal, maybe vendetta is not the correct word, but how much of this is a personal thing for you to find out what could possibly be affecting you physically, mentally, and stuff like that? Because I've always, and I know you guys both talked about it, where maybe this sensitive, this being, this presence that can sense people watching, and there's an intellect to it. Maybe it senses someone like you that feels the way you do for a specific reason. And maybe there's a connection there, like a wavelength that maybe you guys are on the same page.
Yeah. No, so, you know, after my injury, my head injury, in a lot of ways, it did become personal. I wanted answers. I wanted to know what happened. I mean, there's a lot with my injury there that I've never discussed publicly, and I needed answers. Like I couldn't even compartmentalize. I was trying to compartmentalize with what just took place, and so it does become personal in the fact that you witness things, and then it's almost like you can't let it go until you find a way to, you got to find the proper box to put it into in your mind, be able to compartmentalize. And when things happen that there's not a box there to put it in, it's like laying out on the table. And so you got to keep trudging, hoping that you can find that explanation and be able to remove the clutter off the table and organize it to help you, find closure and move on. So it does. And, there's been sometimes, I've told many people, I've spoke about this publicly. They say, why would you keep going back when you've been traumatized as bad as you have? Because I had my head injury, but we've had this, it's been nicknamed the hitchhiker effect, and it's traumatized not only myself, but my wife and my children. And that becomes very personal. And that's the part where, look, I chose to go there and work. I made a decision to be part of that. My kids did not, my wife did not. And when it starts affecting them, that's where I start feeling selfish and saying, as bad as I want to do this, I probably shouldn't if it's going to affect my family. But we've got some, we've had a fair number of individuals, even though we're associated with the Bigelow time, that dealt with that hitchhiker effect. Matter of fact, the hitchhiker effect that term was coined by Jay Stratton.
Yeah.
And if anything, the harder that they tried to get rid of it, the harder that they tried to separate themselves from the ranch. Even going so far as to get rid of anything that they had when they were at the ranch, whether it be clothes or whatever, but going to great lengths to try to separate and sever that tie between them and the ranch. It was almost as if that connection got stronger and they got terrorized more. And so I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that if I was to leave the ranch tomorrow, it would just suddenly leave me and my family alone. So therefore, if it's not going to leave me alone, I'd just as soon be tied to and involved with the investigation of trying to figure out what's going on. Because at least right now, I've got a body of guys and experts that I can lean on. And I'll tell you, nothing is more comforting than when I have something absolutely crazy happen at my house that I wouldn't dare tell anybody.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to reach out to my brothers there on the ranch and be like, hey guys, like this happened. And they don't look at me like I'm a nutcase. They're like, oh, wow. And what's even crazier is when they say, wait, what time did that happen? And I tell them, oh, it was about 3:30 a.m. And they're like, oh my gosh, at the exact same time I was having this take place. So there's a lot of validation that comes from being part of that group. And it has become a personal quest to get answers. And quite honestly, in a lot of ways, kind of like a safety blanket at this point, because I've got people that understand what I'm going through that I can lean on.
If that's presence is said to actually understand and read and all this type of stuff, with your job as superintendent, you're always there. You run the show. Even before the cameras were there and filming this television show, you ran this property. Maybe with a hitchhiker theory, would you ever consider bringing your family to the ranch and like doing some type of, because maybe that they want the whole group. Like, it's just so fascinating to me.
Well, there's the first problem is I came onto this project. I didn't come onto the ranch to go be part of paranormal investigation.
Right.
I'm a small town business guy that had big time aspirations. Here comes this big real estate mogul from outside of the area. And I saw it as an opportunity to start developing relationships with big figures. So I came on simply because of the chance it gave me to rub shoulders with the likes of Brandon Fugal and Jim Morse. That was my motivation. I didn't believe in the whole paranormal stuff. Like I say, yes, my religious beliefs allowed me to believe that there's other beings out there besides us. And it allowed me to believe in the spirit world, which is supposedly around us, which is to me the interdimensional, and there's good spirits, there's bad spirits, the whole good and evil thing, right? So that was all. And in my mind, that's all it was. Like all this stuff was just being hyped up and over exaggerated. I went on there as a total skeptic that there was anything dangerous or anything bad going on. And as such, being a good father, I got 3 boys, and the only way I'm going to make men out of them is to make them work, right? So they come out and I make them come out and work with me at the ranch and do physical labor. And so my entire family's been on that ranch, and now I look back, I'm like, oh, what did I do? I exposed my family to who knows what. My oldest son has been injured a couple times out there. He had radiation poisoning, and so now I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I expose my family to? So my family's all been out to the ranch, and I try to limit their exposure to it now, but sometimes I think it's a little too little, too little too late.
Right.
Does the hitchhiker effect seem to happen more with, well, let me see, what's the right way of putting this? Does it seem to happen less with the more scientific minded people and more with the maybe more not scientific minded, more spiritual minded person, or does it just not discriminate at all?
It's a good question. Right off the bat, I can think of individuals that have been pretty impacted by it that are on both sides of the aisle. So I'd say, I think at first glance, it's non-discriminatory. It's not really picking. Now, I will say that as we've looked at those of us out there that have been seriously injured or affected the worst physically, there does seem to be a pattern that the more headstrong you go on there, like almost the more bombastic or I'm trying to think of the right word, like I guess not respecting it. You go on there just completely, oh, that's a bunch of BS. Nothing's going to happen to me.
Showmanship of just refuting, this is all garbage, hooting and hollering.
Yeah. So at least the ones that I personally know that have been injured the worst out there, we've all kind of shared that same type of attitude that we all carried that kind of you know, I'm going to call it lack of respect for the phenomena.
Have you ever stood out in the middle of the ranch by yourself and almost tried to manifest something with this, where you're just like, have a conversation with it, like, look, show me something, explain something to me, help me, help this make sense to me, please. And if you have done that, have you had any sort of reaction from it when you've done that?
So yeah, this, the science part of me is like, oh, well, if there's an intelligence, so let's see if it'll communicate. And I have to say that I'm very grateful for the privacy afforded out at the ranch, because I have tried a number of different things. I've been out there irrigating at 2 a.m. in the morning by myself, and I know that I'm out of earshot of any cameras, and I'll talk out loud. I'll say things. Um, there's probably been once that I got something, but the problem with that one time is that it's very subjective, and I think that I'm forcing it into that box. So the honest answer is I don't know that I could point to any one thing and say, yes, I went out there and, well, I'll take that back. There was a time, and you can look this up on YouTube. So KSL television came out for the day. They were doing a Halloween piece leading up to Halloween, and they came out, and they're the NBC. They're the NBC affiliate here in Utah, and I think they're the largest television station here. So they send their reporter and their videographer out to the ranch, and they come out and spend a day with us. And there's actually quite a bit of things that happened that day that was pretty interesting. But and I'll give you an example. We were in the command center, and Eric just spent like probably an hour or more explaining to the reporter and the videographer the electromagnetic interference that we see on the ranch. And he was giving, he was talking to him extensively about this electromagnetic interference. We leave directly from there, and we go out to the helipad just outside the command center, and they put their drone down to start flying. And the message, and this is all on the you can find it on YouTube. The drone won't launch, and the message on the screen says too much electromagnetic interference. Relocate the drone. So they kept moving the drone. They were finally able to get it up in the air and get their shots. And then we head over to Homestead 2. They put the drone down on the road, and it won't connect. And it won't connect. And we move it. They change the batteries. They cycle through, power it on, power it off, take the batteries out, put them back in. We're talking about probably a 20-minute exercise of them trying everything they can to get this drone up in the air. And we're sitting there asking, we're like, have you guys ever had these kind of problems with this drone before? And the answer was no. That's the typical question we ask, and that's the typical answer that we get regarding almost all the equipment that comes out there. And so we're like, all right, well, let's walk down the road and see. So we walked, several hundred feet down the road towards the east. On the other side of Homestead 2, put the drone down. It still won't connect. So I lifted my arms up in the air like this, and I just said it out loud. I was like, will you please let the drone fly so that we could get these shots? And as soon as I said that, the drone connected and went up into the air. And so, there's that one time that I spoke out loud and it came up. There's one more, and I'll tell you right now, we'll have to have this conversation in a year or after season 5 airs. We were doing an experiment, and Eric Bard and I were over there at the table. This was not on camera, and that's why, I'll have to share this after you guys watch it. we're setting up for a specific experiment, and I was being a little bit like disrespectful, we'll call it, because I can't think clearly today. I'm just getting over a little bit of a head cold, but I'm telling Eric, I said, Eric, I said, I think we should just talk to the ranch. And he's like, huh? And I was like, I'm getting so sick and tired of these, cell phone malfunctions and this equipment. I was like, that's an old trick at this point. I said, if the ranch really wanted to impress me, it would do this. And I said some specific things. And Eric jumped on board, and we were both laughing and joking. And Eric's like, yeah, and it would do this and this and this. And then I was adding to it, and I'm like, oh yeah, and this and this and this. And the next day, all those things that we were joking about took place.
Wow.
And it was pretty dramatic. And so obviously, if I'm sitting here saying, oh, this doesn't impress me anymore, these are all old tricks, I'm getting bored. And then we start, you can imagine, as we're sitting here saying, this is what it takes to impress me. Well, I'm impressed. And so there are some cases, as I start thinking now specifically about your question, there are some cases like the two I just cited where we did speak out loud and did get what seemed to be a pretty remarkable answer.
I find that I'm glad you told us that, because I find that so interesting. That again, it speaks to the intelligence of what you're dealing with.
And maybe that thing actually needs motivation itself. Like, I picture if this thing has a presence, an aura that can communicate, it's intelligent, and so we just described, kind of reminds me of like this uncle I know, where it's just like, if the dishwasher is full, he's not gonna unload the dishwasher until someone harps on his ass for 3 or 4 times, and eventually it's cleaned out. So it's like, maybe this sentient being has been so used to people being like, oh, whatever, that if you start demanding stuff, maybe there is a connection there with that.
It would seem to be. As funny in this specific scenario, with this experiment, we had a subject matter expert out that was helping us do this, and the subject matter, or the expert, who was sitting there as we were joking about this, and they're like, "Don't say that. You know how much this equipment costs? You can't. Don't say that. That would be devastating." And was not finding it. And then the next day, when the events occurred, I was just quite honestly, Eric and I were like, oh shit, could that, is that related? Could that be related? It left us really wondering, or was it just pure coincidence? Who knows?
Yeah. Wow. And there's so much other stuff too, man. Like I get super interested in that when you take some of the GPS data and it goes underground, and Travis starts talking about how that, it looks like a wormhole, and that would play into that, right? Where you have space existing in a place that it shouldn't exist. I just, man, how does that play into, what you guys are doing in, I guess you can't really tell us what you're doing in season 5, but I hope that kind of stuff continues, and I hope you continue to explore that. I also, another thing,
you will not be disappointed.
Okay, well, good. The Homestead 2 stuff too, that I know the Triangle area has kind of took over a lot of the last season, but the Homestead stuff, man, with the radiation and the when you would do the FLIR camera, the infrared camera, yeah, and that kind of stuff, and all of those differences, and the strangeness of that area, and also the what seemed to be under the ground there. I'm hoping that we, you guys can get back over there too.
You won't be disappointed. I think people are going to be shocked at what some of the things are that we discovered. I don't know if you heard, but season 4 was intense, and season 5 was season 4 times 10.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, we like I say, I think, well, I could say, because our teams joked about it, but you know, we watch certain clips of some of the things that take place, and I find myself a little PTSD, like
Mm.
panicking, holding my breath, almost having a little bit of a panic attack at just the reliving some of that stuff. So
Wow.
I'm excited for what we're going to be sharing with the audience in the upcoming episodes.
Well, you mentioned before, like the terabytes of data, like all this stuff. Like, how is that all secured? Like, in terms of like, where's that all housed and stuff? I mean, obviously, probably can't get too specific, but I'm always curious for the security aspect of that. How does that how does that get secured? And if something happens in season 5, how easy is it for your team to go back to like season 1 or 2 to find something specific? Like, how do you know exactly where something happened in the data where you can take, where does it take 2 weeks to find something
Mm.
to see if it correlates to something that just happened?
Yeah, well, um, I probably will just not really speak a lot. All I can say is that that data is obviously very important to us,
Yeah.
and so we go to great lengths to make sure that it's backed up and secured. Um, and then Eric has, I don't even know the hours that Eric has spent, but he's literally
Posted to the
archived
computer.
everything, and he is so meticulous about and organized that he can actually find things at a drop of a hat because of the way that he's filed them and archived them. So Eric actually has a system that he has an entire thing that goes clear back to the beginning of when Brandon first purchased the ranch, and he can find stuff in literally 30 seconds. So kudos to him for having the wherewithal and being organized
Yeah.
enough to file that in such a manner that makes it retrievable.
Well, it seems like it helps. It's conducive to a good scientific environment that you can just find information and not waste days and time. When it comes to that, though, Eric, say you like how, in terms of music and stuff, like how easy is it for you to go back and try and find some riff you played 2 years ago that could fit a song now? Like how, like what's your process for that?
Luck. I mean, honestly, I got kind of a weird brain, man, where I forget if I don't lay it if I don't record whatever I've got into my phone right now, if I don't write down a lyric idea that I have right now, if I don't write down a story idea that I have right now in the moment, if I don't do something with it right then, I tell myself I'll remember it and I never do. And I get so mad at myself when I don't. So I do have archived things around. It's actually kind of fun. It's almost like treasure hunting in a way. Sometimes I'll open up a hard drive that I haven't opened in years and go, I wonder what's in this, and I actually found a really good guitar riff the other day doing that. And I was like, oh, this might work for the next Shinedown record. Um, that's kind of how that works, man. Uh when you sit down to write a song, songwriting is so well, it's spiritual. It's in the moment. It's you're a conduit for something that is and I know I sound woo-woo as fuck, man, but it's a conduit, man. You are a conduit for something else.
Yeah.
And so when Brent and I sit down to write a song, or myself and someone else sits down to write a song, we a lot of that stuff just kind of happens. I don't go back to a lot of other things. I don't bring old things into a songwriting session usually. Usually it's just sit down in a room with an acoustic guitar, a piano, and go and see what happens and comes out. Um, but a song like A Symptom of Being Human, which is the current single, that riff, that guitar riff was actually a piano riff that I had written in like 2013.
Yeah.
And I found it early on in the writing process and just sort of archived it away in my brain. I was like, I want to go back to that. I want to revisit this because I've always thought this piano part was really good, and no one else. I'd maybe tried to turn it into two or three other things with other people, and no one ever warmed up to it. And I knew there was something in it. So
Yeah.
um, but I didn't use the one that I had recorded. I came in the room and just we decided that it sounded better on guitar than on piano. So I just sat there with the acoustic guitar and we just let the song happen. That song happened really quickly. That song in songwriting terms happened really quickly, and it took about a day to write all the lyrics, and another half a day to kind of go back over and make sure they were what we
Yep.
wanted, and that was it.
Wow.
So yeah, so
Such a
um,
unique process.
but it differs. One day it might be that, then the next time it might be. So a song like Devil, right? We're off of Attention. Uh, the riff that you hear at the beginning of that, it's actually the first guitar riff you hear at the beginning of the record, that is literally the first time I ever played that riff, because I had a Pro Tools session open. I was just trying to find something. I was trying to find a riff, and it wasn't even the beat that's in the song. I think I played it over a different beat, but I played that riff and I went back. I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. So I doubled it real quick and I was like, I'll play this for Brent tomorrow. And it turned into that song over the next couple of days. We took that riff and wrote the song around it. But I think I think it's awesome that the riff that you hear at the beginning of that record is literally the first time it came out of my fingers. Like, it was like that conduit that was happening in that moment is what you hear. I was like, I don't want to re-record this. This part, at least the intro, because we added other guitars to it later. But I don't want to re-record this because that was the moment that the song was born, literally, and that's what you hear on the record. So yeah. So, and it goes back, dude, we've come full circle. It goes back to Shooting from the Hip. It comes back to, the world is hearing that moment. The world is hearing that moment, just like the world is seeing that moment with you all when you're doing your science. It's not convoluted. It's not peer reviewed. It's not gone over and made pure, right? It's just this magical thing that happened. And look, man, I'll say something else to that point. History remembers the disruptors. They don't remember the people that played it safe. They don't remember look, I have to say it, man, Michio Kaku, and I enjoy watching him. But Michio Kaku or Bill Nye or what's Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
I think those names going in the history will probably forget those people and remember people who were pushing the envelope. Eric Weinstein actually had a really interesting point. And maybe it was on it might have been on Rogan when he was on there when he made this point, but I found it interesting. He said that it feels like, or seems like, in science or in physics, that after the atomic bomb happened, that all the real physics stopped. Like something happened. Somebody took away all of the great minds and put them somewhere else where we don't know where they are or what they're doing. They're doing something else right now, and rolled out all of these other faces for science. And he made the point. I believe it was him that made the point, and it could be attributed to someone else, but that if you really, string theory became the thing, right? And everybody's chasing string theory, but the point is that was made is that if you really look at string theory, it doesn't lead anywhere. It doesn't lead us to any answers. It's a MacGuffin, it's like
Distraction.
It's a distraction. Like, the real science, it seems like either we forgot how to do science. We were doing the best science that's ever been known to man, and then instantaneously forgot how to do science, or all of the people who know how to do real science and really know what's going on are somewhere else doing the real science, and we don't know anything about it.
Or murdered.
Or murdered, John.
But a point I want to before we shut this off. Recently in Vegas, Eric and I were backstage with some of our friends from CERN, and they were talking about a scientist of theirs that had this 20-year experiment. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric. Was it antimatter?
Yeah, he was studying antimatter, and his experiment was he was going to capture antimatter. And we went to CERN and saw the machine. We talked to this guy at one point. That was a few years ago. That was in 2019 or 18.
Yes.
But he was going to contain antimatter, and once he contained it, if the antimatter went up instead of down, like it wasn't affected by gravity, it did the opposite. It did the anti-gravity, basically. Then he's like, I win a Nobel Prize. If I contain the antimatter and I put it in here and it goes down and drops, I start all over again. And literally 20 years he worked on this just to do that one experiment to get that one result. And
Right. So it drops. And
yeah, it
then
drops,
he
right?
didn't get the answer he wanted. We were both taken aback by it because it's like this guy was so upset. But I guess my question to you is, when it comes to like a song or an album or a science project on Skinwalker Ranch, if you don't get the answer or the reception you think you want or need to hear or get, how do you move forward to continue in pursuit of finding that thing?
I mean, I can speak to it from an artistic standpoint. I think there's probably a divide between maybe there's not. Maybe there's not a divide. With art, it's um I'm a river, right? I'm not bound to like, okay, this thing didn't work or this thing sucks or no one likes this thing that I made. I'll just make another one. You know? Now, it's not I would love to think that I'm that resilient about it. I'm not. I'm sensitive, right? So there's a little bit more trepidation with it and uh you know, head in hands. But I know that that I'm just going to do it again. I'm just going to keep doing it. I can't do anything else. I can't ever stop creating things.
Right.
I, but also like my favorite things on our records are the things that no one talks about. They don't like necessarily, but they're always my favorite moments. Like the last song on Planet Zero is a song called "What You Wanted," and Brent and I literally wrote the song on an iPhone. Like I just got done making a solo record that will be released soon. It's been done for a while. But I just got done making that, and I didn't know what to do with a guitar. I was like, what do I do with? I don't want to write a song with a guitar. I'm so sick of writing with guitars and pianos. So we were sitting at my kitchen table, and I opened up my iPhone and had this string patch in it, and I just started hitting notes, and we wrote this song, and literally plugged my phone into the console back there and recorded it, and that's what became that song. I love that song. I love that song lyrically. You know, it's about the media, you know, driving dissent between amongst people, and you know, did you get what you wanted? You know, but that song doesn't get talked about a lot. But man, do I love it! And so, guess what? I've always got it, and I can always enjoy it. So, from an artistic standpoint, that's how I deal with that. Like I said, it's not easy. You do have that, again, negativity bias. Somebody says something about it, you get a little out of sorts, but you just you got to pick up the baton again and keep going. Thomas, how does that apply to what you guys are doing, you think?
Yeah. So, I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I'm used to, I've always, and I think this is what makes innovation amazing. Go back and look at the people that have really changed society, changed history, changed the world. They're the people that had a vision that, in most cases they had to sell. And a lot of times people weren't even ready for what they had at the time they were here. But you look, Walt Disney is a perfect example. His brother Roy never really quite could see the vision, but he trusted Walt. And you go back and look when Walt was getting ready to build Disney World, and all of his board and even his own brothers, like, this is financial suicide, who would come to this thing. And but Walt could see it. And I think that's what makes us different. And I look at the world even statistically. We all talk about the one percenters. Why are they the one percenters? Right. And I mean, I'm not going to get political about that, but there's something there where, if a lot of times, if the 99% are going along with it, I don't want to be going with them, because
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
I want to be in that 1% thing. And if that's where everybody's trending to, I'm the kind that goes the opposite way. And I like to buck the system. But I think that it comes down to a feeling that you have inside, or even, look, there's going to be some things that I'm sharing in the future here that I fully expect the majority of people will probably ridicule me. I'm bracing myself for an absolute massacre publicly. But when you know inside that it's right, or what you know, right? And it's going to be my job to effectively communicate. And whether it comes down to entrepreneur or science or even music, the job really is with the person who's got that vision to be able to effectively communicate it to others and sell them on it, or help them see the vision. And so with me, like, I know what I've witnessed out there. I know the experiences I've had. It'll come down to how well I'm able to communicate that with people. And I think at the end of the day too, my motivation is not to try and convince anybody. Like, this is what's happened. Take it or leave it.
Right.
But my intention there is maybe to open eyes as to, there will be some people that are like, well, what if he's telling the truth? What does that mean? Right. And so I have to say, through the last 5 years, my skin's got a lot thicker, and I know the other guys have too. Like, I care less and less what people say at this point. I even find joy in, when a lot of people are railing, I figure I must be saying something that's striking a nerve. And I'm moving forward anyways. It's not going to affect what we're doing. And when I feel like I'm right and everybody's not going along with it, for me, I just say they just don't see the vision yet. Like, I just need to better communicate what it is I'm trying to show.
Yeah. And look, man, there's a correlation with what you just said with writing and with art, which is, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to if you're not creating something if you're not being honest when you're creating something, then you're creating the wrong thing. And you can't worry about what others are. You can't write a record for your fans. You got to write a record for you. You have to write a song for you. Just like you have to be honest about your experiences and what you're going to say. And even if it is going to be a shitstorm, so be it. And it's honest, and that's what's important. And that will free you.
Yep. I'm doing it for me. Yeah, you're right. Like, you got to do it for yourself. Be true to yourself, and then let the chips fall where they may.
Yep.
Screw all those other people. You always have a platform here, Thomas. So I'm glad you're doing it. So.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
But again, this has been great. I know we've got almost an hour and a half, but I know with season 5 coming up on History Channel, Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. Eric, I know Shinedown's kind of off year coming up, a couple of shows, writing.
But we're writing a record.
You kind of hinted at your solo album coming, so everyone can look forward to that and be good to go.
Absolutely. And I loved this, man. This is awesome.
Gonna have to come catch one of your shows one of these days.
Please, man. I told John we played Salt Lake, and I think he might have reached out or something, but you guys, I think, were right in the middle of everything.
You would have been in the middle of season 5 for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But well, we so we're gonna write a record, so we'll probably tour again in earnest in 2025. So I mean, I would love to have you all out, man, and I would love to come see the ranch as well at some point. So.
Yeah.
We'll all hitchhike there, and then we'll take all that stuff away from Thomas. All right. Thank you, guys.
Hey, gentlemen, thank you so much. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Bye. Oh, hello. I'm just enjoying this nice fucking candle. Anyways, I'm John, the host of Spirit Talk, and I want to talk to you about nice fucking candles. We are lucky to have Nice Fucking Candles as a sponsor of the podcast. And if you use code SPIRITTALK15, you get 15% off your first order, or use the affiliate link below to always get your candle needs through Nice Fucking Candles. Nice Fucking Candles are 100% soy wax. They have a 65-hour burn time, maybe more if you nurse the flame a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not an expert on flames or candles, but I will say these things burn a long fucking time. You ask me about the wick. It's a double wick for even burning, which is amazing. And they come with 3 incredible flavors. I'm not sure if you're going to be eating these candles, but if you do like them, the scents are eucalyptus and ginseng, tobacco and fireside, and seaside and driftwood. Once again, Nice Fucking Candles. They are the candle company for Spirit Talk. If you love candles and need a good scent to clear out your office, your room, your podcast room, your weight room, whatever you're doing in a room that smells like crap, use this candle. It's amazing. Thank you. Check them out. Love Nice Fucking Candles.